Hey everyone, welcome to Play Hooky with me. My name is Roz, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing my two favorite techniques for flat seam joins for crochet. Both of these are ideal when you are looking for a simple way to join multiple pieces that lies nice and flat for you and can be virtually invisible depending on the technique that you use. Both of these do have their pros and cons, which I'll be sharing as we work on the techniques. We're going to be doing a slip stitch for the first one with an alternative to the slip stitch, and then the second technique will be the invisible join. I've added timestamps in the description box below so you can jump to your point of interest, and all the information regarding the yarn and the hook that you see in the video will also be in the description box. So the pro is that you do have a beautiful flat seam on the front, but the con is that in the back you will have ridges. So if you're looking for a technique that gives you a flat seam on both sides, this isn't the one. I would recommend that this is a good technique if you're working with squares like you see here, where all the edges are in the same color, because even when you are joining, you're going to see a little bit of that slip stitch peering through. Okay, so to get started with the slip stitch join, it's very simple. You're going to take your squares or your motifs and you're going to make sure that they are facing right sides together. All we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing slip stitches into the back portion of both squares here. Add a slip knot to your hook or fasten on however you like best. For my squares here, I have 2 chains in between, so I'm going to work into the first chain here, just into the back loop of it, and then finding the corresponding chain on the opposite panel. I'm going to do a slip stitch to get started. And then we just continue on, making sure that we're going into the front and the back. Yarn over, pull through, and slip stitch. I try to make sure that my tension is a bit relaxed here. If you do it too tight, your piece is going to pucker and you don't want that. So I'm just going to continue on. And just work your way all the way across. Okay, coming to the corner here, going into the first chain in my corner with a slip stitch. And there we go. So that's the basic technique for this. What I would recommend when you're building your blanket, I would suggest that you work in panels, meaning that I'm just going to take from here and just continue on, just doing these side seams until I reach the width of my blanket. That way it'll make the next panel and joining your intersections together a lot easier. So with that in mind, let's pretend that I have done a panel where I've slip stitched all along the width, and I've also done that for my second row, and I've done a panel for that, and we're going to be joining them together. I want you to see how to join to get this intersection taken care of. So you'll do the same thing. You'll just sandwich your pieces together, right sides facing each other. Continuing in the same way, fasten onto your corner however you like best, matching the corners up as best as you can. Just going to go ahead and slip stitch across until we reach the center, and I'll be back. So once I've reached the center here, I'm just going to continue on trying to slip stitch to the best that I can to make this as tight and snug as I can. Just finding the front and back loops. I haven't come up with a completely foolproof method of this, but to the best of my capability, I just try to find some loops that will join it together nicely. There we go. And just simply have a look at it. Once you get a couple of these intersections down, you'll know for your piece what is working best for you. It's really going to vary for all of us. That's pretty good. Now with your motifs, you may not get as big of a gap as I am, but this is definitely why I would opt for the same color edges to help that disappear. An alternative for the same technique of working in the back stitches is to work with a tapestry needle. You start by placing the right sides together like you were before, and you're going to do the same process. You're going to work into the back stitch of both of the panels, just joining as we were. I do prefer this way of doing it simply because I just have more control. I can get a little bit tighter. I find I can join the pieces a little bit more tightly this way. It's slightly faster as well. The other pro to this technique is that you get a lovely flat seam on both sides with this. And here, I'll show you here in just a moment. So here is the right side. Okay, so your piece is joined here as looking very similar to the slip stitch with the crochet hook, but on the back you can see there's hardly any ridge at all with this technique. Here it is with the slip stitch versus doing it with a tapestry needle. And then when you want to join the panels together, again just facing right sides together, then you'll go in and do the same thing all the way across. Getting close to my intersection here. Just going through the best I can. Like I said, I kind of fudge it here. You may be watching me and be saying, oh no, Roz, don't do it like that. But this works for me. Again, with the tapestry needle, I feel like I have more control with tightening that center. This is what I use all the time for my projects when I'm working with multiple color squares. Here's one, for example, that I worked on using this technique. And as you can see, it is very difficult to see where I am seaming. That's the front side. And here's the back. So a very lovely flat seam join. So for this example, I'm just going to continue on with the pink that I was using earlier. You're just going to thread your favorite tapestry needle. I would recommend that you use a nice pointy tip here. I prefer that because we are going to be working into the center of our stitches. So just like the slip stitch join, I would recommend that you work in panels. So that means I would join here, okay, and continue on all the way across with my width, and then do the same thing with row 2, and then join the panels together. But it's not as imperative to do that this way as it is with the slip stitch join. For me personally, there are a lot of times where I just add a square here and there whenever I have time, and it's just a case of getting a nice long piece of yarn and then just joining. You'll get the hang of this and you'll see what works best for you. For this technique, either way, if you're working on the table, have all of the right sides facing you. If you're working with the pieces together, you want the right sides facing towards you. So to get started, I am notorious for not getting this lined up properly. So what I like to do is I don't knot anything in. I just get started and I leave myself a lovely tail to correct myself later. Okay, so go ahead and working into your first corner, go through the middle of your stitch. Doing the same thing in your next corner, just going into the middle. And like I said, this may not line up perfectly. You can always go back in and fix it later if you leave yourself a nice tail. This is pretty much a mattress stitch, and we're working it just in the centers of these stitches. You're just going to be going in a zigzag fashion all the way across. We've already worked these first 2 sides. I'm moving back to the front panel, going into the center. Okay, moving back to the back panel here. Doing my best to get into the center. You may find that you go into the threads or fibers of these stitches. Go ahead and do that. That's totally fine. That's why I like to have a sharp tip on my needle, because I want that. It helps to camouflage it even more. Just going back and forth. You want to feel a little bit of resistance. I've found it looks better if it does have resistance to it. If it goes in too easily, those are the ones that usually show up more. Just continue weaving back and forth. And we're coming to the end here. Okay. Give it a nice pull. So as you can see, it looks pretty good. You can maybe see it a little bit here, but for the most part, that is pretty darn invisible to me, leaving a lovely flat seam on both sides. So you can do it a couple of ways here. I could just go ahead and pull this up and sandwich these together, making sure the right sides are facing outward, and just continue on across. Or you can work flatly, completely up to you. I need to get across to this center, moving on to this center here to connect it all. And I don't have a specific explanation on how to do this. I just kind of wing it. I just get into that center. And sometimes I pass over places a couple of times just to make sure that they're really securing in the middle there. Make it nice and tight, pull on it. And then I just continue on as I was, making sure to get into these centers. There we go. Because of this sample being small, it's easier for me to just do holding up, but when I'm working on a big project, I keep it on the table and just work on the table. So I'm just going to finish this real quick so I can show you the fourth panel joining. Okay, I'm getting ready to add another panel. Just the same concept. I'm just going to join and stitch my way across until I get to the center. Okay, so getting ready to work my center here. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, working into that same stitch, just doing my best to make it work here. Okay, at the intersection here, I'm just going to go through all the centers and work my way back up. So I'm going to go into this center. I think I'm going to move into that portion there. As you can see, I just kind of wing it, kind of repeating where I've been before because I know it worked. And that looks pretty good to me. Looks great on the back side. And then I'm just going to continue on with working my way across. Every now and again I'll tug on it just to make it a little bit easier. If I leave it till the end, it may be harder to tighten, so I just do it as I go. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you give these techniques a try.